All right, our next speaker has come all the way from Michigan. He's going to talk to us. She's involved with Protect Life Michigan and is their college coordinator. And we've been trying to get Young Americans for Solidarity more active, and this is a speech aimed at them. It's about organizing on college campuses.
Well, good morning, everyone. So for a moment, I'd like you to humor me. If you went to college, I'd like you to imagine what that experience was like for you. If you didn't go to college, you can just imagine something similar. So think about the academics, maybe some classes you took, maybe what you majored in. Think about some of those social activities you were involved in, maybe some of the friends that you made. And then lastly, I want you to think about some of the clubs or organizations that you were involved in during your time in college. And wouldn't it be awesome if you were able to be involved in a club that had similar values, that believed in the platforms that you believed in? Maybe you had that opportunity, or maybe you're thinking that this would be a great opportunity to get college campuses organized around ASP. So hello, I'm Haili Gusa. I work for Protect Life Michigan. We are a pro-life nonprofit. We work with high school students, college students, and young professionals. What we do is teach them how to talk about the topic of abortion in a way that is both truthful, not compromising on the morality, just as this party does not, but also sharing that in a way that is compassionate and kind and loving. So today I want to talk about how to organize on college campuses and what I've found as the college coordinator to be effective. I did used to be a student at Central Michigan University in our pro-life club there, and now I'm head of the department which manages supervisors, which manages students that are out on their campuses on the ground fighting this battle. So a couple of things I want to touch on is the biggest things with college clubs that you'll hear over and over again that people ask questions about organizing is recruitment and retention. So I wanted to pick something from each of those big areas. So for recruitment, we'll touch on recruitment fairs. And then for retaining or retention, we're going to touch on how do you have engaging meetings. And then lastly, I'll give you just some general tips and tricks that I've picked up along the way. So let's start with recruitment fairs. Now, when you're trying to get people in the club, especially if you're just starting, as it sounds like many of you might want to do, I know I talked to a college professor yesterday, or someone who used to be faculty at a university, or even a mom of a college-age student. How do you get something like this started? And one way you have to do that is by finding the people first. So at Protect Life Michigan, we find it to be very effective to go to the fall recruitment fair that colleges have. It might go by a different name, like at Michigan State University, they call it Sparticipation because they're the Spartans, so it could be something creative, but you'll see hundreds of students will come through this fair, of course, depending on the size of your college or university. Many of them are freshmen or underclassmen, some of them are transfers, and then you will have upperclassmen as well. You want to be able to connect with as many of those students as possible. So there's some things you have to do prior to this, like making sure you have 2 to 3 board members, you have a student, you have an advisor for your club, and that your club is registered for the fair. But after that, you're getting set up for the fair, you want to be able to talk to as many students as possible. So a couple pieces of advice that might not always be thought of or might have gotten forgotten in the shuffle of planning is you want to have a table that's very clear of what you're representing. So you can see, like in that picture, some of my coworkers are holding pro-life join us signs. It's very clear that we're organizing for a pro-life club. If you have your table, you want to stand in front of it to recruit students. So you're not just behind the table, like trying to maybe get a couple names down on your list. You're out in front, you're asking people as they walk by, typically some sort of polarizing question to figure out if they want to be involved. So we ask, like, hey, are you pro-life? Hey, are you pro-life? To everyone basically that's walking by, and we know if they say yes, we're like, oh, well, let's tell you more about Students for Life at Central Michigan University, or let's tell you more about Michigan State Protect Life. And if they say no, then we just let them keep walking. So at a recruitment fair, the goal is not to engage in dialogue for a long period of time, because you might spend 30 minutes talking to this guy who really wants to debate you on the pro-life issue or on politics, when you just had 15 people walk by that might have been interested in your club and may have come to your first meeting. So I think that's important to know too. When you're recruiting, you're in recruitment mode. So you're not talking to your friends at the table, you're not trying to engage in those lengthy discussions, you're actively getting as many people to sign up as possible. That leads me into getting signups. If you're not collecting contact information, you're not doing it right. You're not going to be able to follow up with those people. You might have distributed lots of flyers, they might have access to your website now, but the likelihood of them taking action just based on that is very low. You're going to be more likely to get people to show up if you sent a follow-up email or a follow-up text. The most personal way of connecting with them is best, and you want to do that within 24 hours. So when you're the one reaching out and reminding them, hey, we have this club meeting at the end of the week, or we have this club meeting next Monday we want to see you at. It was great to meet you today at the recruitment fair. That is very, very helpful, especially if they're at a recruitment fair. They've probably talked to at least 20 other organizations and they've lost track of who they talked to, and they have 10 different flyers for 10 different meetings. So you want to be able to follow up on how that went. Also, I'll show you a picture of what it looked like when we recruited at Central Michigan University. We would also hand out flyers that had our first meeting information on it. We'd end up handing out over 100 flyers. And I would say when we are at a recruitment fair, we're getting a minimum of 100 people to sign up on our spreadsheet because we're talking to everyone walking by. If you're somewhere like Michigan State University, you're getting over 100 people to sign up on that spreadsheet. So in this image, you can see a couple of things I said. We're standing in front of the table. We have these signs. On our table, there is a framed QR code, so students can easily take out their phone, scan that, fill out their information, and now we have a spreadsheet with all of that. We can copy all those emails, paste them, and get that first email sent out right away. So it's very organized in that regard. We also have a prize wheel on our table, so students are very enticed if they sign up for our club, they can spin the wheel, and we have different fun things that are personalized with the Protect Lake Michigan logo. So those are some ways that we attract students. In the past, we've also done, you'll be entered into a drawing to win a pair of Beats headphones or something that students are interested in winning. So kind of enticing them in that way. If you can see we're in front, my friend Courtney is organizing with me, smiling, friendly, and we're doing that for 2 hours or 3 hours or however long that fair goes. So this is very, very helpful in getting students. The fall recruitment fair is much more helpful even than the spring recruitment fair. Winter, it's much harder to get students. They've already found groups, they've already found community. You do have some freshmen coming in, you do have some transfers, but most people have kind of found a place on campus. So capitalizing on the fall is the most ideal way to do this. So that's a piece of recruiting. We find that our clubs that have really successful fall recruitment fairs are some of our just most successful clubs in general. So that's why I put so much emphasis on this. We'll move a little bit into retention here. So retention, you want to have good meetings. You want to have engaging meetings with engaging content. We've probably all been a part of groups that have really boring meetings. Maybe you question whether you should even go because you're like, what do I get out of this? Maybe you only go because you get to see your friends before or after the meeting. So we want that to not be the case with our college groups at Protect Lake Michigan. One thing that helps with that is having planned and consistent meetings. So you're not getting to the week of the meeting and saying, oh, maybe we should have a meeting tonight at 5 p.m. Or let's plan one for Thursday at 6 and kind of changing that around. Students do not appreciate that. They like consistency. If you're having weekly meetings, you're having them on the same day at the same time. Similar if you're having bi-weekly meetings, something like that. Because it helps students remember, they know, okay, I have that after this class every single week, or I have that on my least busy day every single week. And they keep track of that. So that's a small note, but it pays dividends in the end if you're being consistent. So let's talk a little bit about meeting structure. As I've been researching about college groups and how to retain members and what are actually good structures for meetings, I talked with Emily Albrecht. She is from Equal Rights Institute. So Josh Brom, he came up in conversation a little bit yesterday. But they work with 37 different colleges, coaching them. They have campuses across the United States, but also in the country of Denmark, I learned. And Emily, in her time both in college and as a coach, has found that this structure works exceptionally well. So I'm going to kind of walk through what that looks like. This is for an hour meeting that most college clubs, that's the length of their meeting. So first, you're starting off with something that builds some community. We talk a lot about community and ASP. I've heard that word over and over as I've been a part of this convention. We're just doing something small right away to have everyone feel heard and included and welcomed. So maybe it's just a question and going around the room and having everyone answer. So like, why do you want to be involved with ASP? Or why do you want to be involved with Protect Lake Michigan? Or tell us a little bit about your hometown. Or what is one of the platforms you care most about within our party? Or what is an issue that you care most about within the pro-life movement? Anything like that kind of helps build that community, understand why people are here. So you're taking anywhere from like 5 to 10 minutes to do this. The other nice thing is you'll find if you're in a college group or you're helping organize one, you pretty much always have that one student who's always late. So sometimes it's just because they're always late, and other times it's because they have a class right before the meeting, so they're always just going to pop in 5 minutes late because they have to sprint across campus to get to your meeting. If you do this, it's not really that big of a deal if they come in and it kind of interrupts this community aspect of the meeting. They kind of pop in, answer the question, jump in line, whatever that looks like. But if you started your more educational component of the meeting, it's a little bit more of a disruption. You're like, okay, all right, take your seats, and everyone's a little bit distracted for a moment. So kind of nice for the beginning of a meeting to be a little bit more relaxed, but still has that structure, if that makes sense. So community building. Next up, you have announcements. A problem with college clubs, if you spend the whole meeting doing announcements, you are not doing something right. Students do not want to come just to hear about what the next event is or to vote on t-shirt color or something like that. You need to have more than just announcements, but we recognize their importance. So you're spending no more than 10 minutes on this section, probably closer to 5. Then we get to the meat and potatoes of the meeting that you're probably spending 20 or 30 minutes on this component, normally 20. So that's the educational side of things. What are you learning in this meeting? So for our pro-life clubs, we're doing an apologetics 101, or we're answering how do you respond to my body, my choice, or how do you respond to this exception when it comes to the pro-life argument. And we take that time to really go through that. We'll have maybe a mock discussion at the end, like partner up with someone, talk through this. For this party, if you're organizing clubs, this could look like a couple different things. Maybe you pick a specific platform and you run through that during that meeting and like really get into those questions and dive into that. Maybe you're using some content from your national website. I know I was reading some blogs from your members. Some of those could potentially be turned into meeting content, but something of that nature. And then the last part of this is having group time. And this idea is a little bit unique, but when I heard Emily talk about it, I was like, wow, this seems like it would actually work very well. And it helped her club. She saw a rise in retainment when she did this in her club. So the first 3 things might sound kind of normal. You're like, oh, I've been in groups that do that. But the group time is something that's a little different. So what she would do during this time is students would split up into groups. So you'd have at least 4 in a group. So depending on the size of your club, you might only have 1 group, or you might have 3 or 4, depending on what that looks like, even more. And I'll give an example because I think that's the most helpful. But for one of her groups, they might help with the social media side of things. So she has someone that's in charge of the group, similar to like a committee, or like a subcommittee and then a committee chair. And the breakdown of the group might look like you have 2 people that are working on the social media content for the club that week. So they're creating posts, they're creating caption. Maybe you have another person who's working on a little more intense project. They're scripting out what your reel or your short video you're going to post on your pages. And then maybe someone else is responding to comments from the previous week on your social media. So now you can schedule that out on your social media scheduler, and your club is set for the next week. And it takes a lot of weight off of and burden off of your officer team to have to do stuff outside of the group. And then you can get a lot more creative with groups as well. So she talked about one type of group that I think is particularly relevant to starting an ASP club on a campus, and that would be a public policy group. Maybe you have some students that are researching the policy in their state or at a national level, and then they're doing that at each meeting for 20 minutes or whatever that looks like during that particular day. And then maybe they become the education spot in a later meeting. So they've done all this research, and each month they get the opportunity to update the club on, hey, this is Michigan's latest policy in this area, or this is the national policy that's happening that you really should be aware of if you're a member of our club. So it's very interesting. You can dive into different topics club members are interested in, but it gives them a chance to research like what they care about, and also be a part of a small group, just as you see a lot of churches will have small groups or like communities. It kind of builds that in a different way. And during that small group time, the president is not part of a small group, so what they do, everyone breaks off, but say you have 2 new members that showed up today and they don't really know what's happening, they've never seen this before, the president can come up to them and say, oh, hi, I'm the president of the club, like how are you? Maybe take 5 to 8 minutes to kind of get to know them, what they're interested in, how do you find out about us, and then maybe recommend a group to them, and they can sit in that group for the rest of the meeting. They could always switch groups if they decide, oh, well, I'm actually more interested in helping with social media than public policy. But it's a chance like you get to engage with new members, and then you get to plug them in. So when I heard that, I was like, wow, that is a really cool way to do that. So her recommendation is typically going to look like 10 minutes for community builder, 10 minutes for announcements, hopefully no more than that, 20 for education, and 20 for team time. But you can change that, especially if you have an educational topic that takes a lot more time this week than it would make all the other parts smaller, but just kind of an outline that you can adjust. So have engaging meetings, have meetings where members are getting something out of that meeting, community-based, but also educational. Then we'll head into just some general tips and tricks that I've found to be helpful in my time coordinating college groups. So one is mentorship. This is something we do at Protect Life Michigan. We have staff or students that are in charge of a campus, so in charge of helping them. They're reaching out minimally every 2 weeks to have a phone call to see how that group is doing. If they're actually on that campus in person, they're doing so in person more on a weekly basis or sometimes more than that. They use frequent if a campus isn't very connected with us at all. We don't have someone on there, like staff that's connected with them. We're probably reaching out every month and a half, but that would be the most we would want to go in between talking with them. During that time, we're creating macro goals, so goals for the whole semester, goals for the whole year, and then we're creating micro goals, which are between those meetings that we have, so every 2 weeks, 3, 4, 5, whatever their meeting time looks like. You don't want to be living Groundhog Day when you're doing that. You don't want to be going over the same goals every time you meet with them, as in those micro goals. You want them to have a report on what they did about them, so you're not trying to do the same thing every single time. That's frustrating for both the coach on the campus and also the students that are there. So mentorship can be valuable as the club is moving along, whether it be a Protect Life Michigan staff member, as it is for us, or someone that's maybe an advisor on a campus, or an ASP member that's helping start that college group. So just think about, I guess, what that looks like. And one of the other things I was going to mention is just building relationships in general is very, very important. So we try to pour into our students. We really care about relationships and investment. We see that a lot of our full-time staff members used to be students in our college groups because we cared about them. They really bought into the mission and what we're doing. They seen we're effective, that we're strategic, and now they're a part of the group. So the more personal contact, the better. We often grab coffee with some of our students, or they grab coffee with some of the other members in the club and build relationships that way, not only to talk about the club, but to share about personal life and ask how they're doing. You can't do that, then a Zoom call, then a phone call, then a text, getting less and less personal kind of as that goes. But relationships are going to be important. I find that the students get involved are normally invited by someone that they know. So someone in the club already says, hey, you're my friend, you want to come to this meeting with me? Or they know them from somewhere else. So I've seen like my family is getting very involved in pro-life things. They always have been, even more so now because I personally invite them. Or they're at college and I can help equip them now that they're at that stage of life. So keep that in mind throughout this presentation, is that organizing on these campuses is you're going to utilize personal connection, or the students you're talking with are going to utilize their personal connection quite a bit. Resources at Protect Life Michigan, we have a lot of pre-made resources, which is nice for our clubs, so something to consider as ASP looks to have more organizations on college campuses. We have like meeting content that's pre-made at our website, protectlifemi.org. We also have a constitution that's pre-made for our groups that they can tweak if needed, but if they're going to start a group, they don't have to spend a couple hours trying to like reinvent the wheel. We already have that for them. So this, once again, could go back to maybe using your platforms or some of that content on your national website already. And then at Protect Life Michigan, we definitely put a lot of priority on outreach, on activism. So we're out in campus having conversations with students on that campus. So taking what we've learned in meetings, that education, that apologetics, and then trying to change hearts and minds, to change our culture, to make abortion unthinkable, both on campus and then in the state of Michigan as a whole. So I think outreach offers a lot of buy-in to members because they get to be a part of something. They get to take what they learned to the street, to their campus, and then they get to see those mind changes. They get to see that impact. They get to hear from people saying, God bless you for being out here and making a difference and defending the unborn. So some sort of activism or outreach for ASP, I think, would be important as well. So that might look like a tabling display that talks more about the American Solidarity Party. It could look like something else as well. So just some food for thought. Students like to be out doing things. Sometimes it takes a little bit to get them there. It can be very intimidating at first, but especially if they're shadowing someone who's experienced, or they're shadowing you or the person that started the group, they can build that confidence, and then they get to see the fruits of that, which is very, very powerful. And then they can share that in meetings. So that can be very helpful when organizing college groups. Those are some general tips and tricks. We were able to go over first kind of recruitment fairs, and then talk about retainment, how to not have a boring meeting, and then go into these general tips and tricks that I wanted to share. So at this point in time, if anyone has any questions, I would be more than happy to take them. All right, we got lots. Here we go.
So I was wondering if you could describe in a little bit more detail the process of getting a club established, getting it registered, and what to what extent can non-students, like many of us here, have a role in it?
That's a good question. So a couple of things, and I only touched on it briefly in the speech, so I'm glad you asked for some more, a more in-depth answer. But typically it's going to look like you need 2 to 3 students that are willing to be board members. So you do have to seek them out. You kind of have to do the legwork on the front end of that and try to find students that are involved. Probably helpful to go to other groups that are already established on campus that might have similar values. So you might look to like a Catholic group or a Christian group, especially in relation to ASB, but even for pro-life stuff. So 2 to 3 students, depends on the school. You have to look into the policy. Then you have to find a faculty member, normally to be a part of the group, so some sort of advisor. This can also be hard to seek out, but you look at other connections, whether it be Christian or other groups that maybe have like policy alignment to ASP. So advisor, 2 to 3 students, and then they normally have to they would have to register the group. So a student would go in and register the group. It is a little hard for people that are not college students to like keep up with the group, but that's the nice thing. Once you have your core people, then you're relying on them. So, hey, can you schedule this location to table at? Can you schedule this classroom to have a meeting in? But you can definitely, once you have a table registered, you can go to the recruitment fair and help. It's always good to have more manpower there. It's because as a student, it can be very intimidating, especially at first. So that's normally what the front end of that looks like, and that can include having a constitution, which we have, like I said, one laid out for Protect Life Michigan. But anything else you want me to dig into for that? Okay, excellent. All right, Skylar, you have a question?
Yeah, it's kind of a similar line. It's like if you're in a situation where you have one student who's really enthusiastic, but they have a lot of trouble getting people to join them, like, do you encourage them to just keep trying to hold it together, even if they're the one doing most of the work, or do you encourage them to do other things in the community and like spend their time more like outside of the college?
That's a good question, and it probably depends on your end goal. So like Protect Life Michigan, we want our students to be able to help reach their campus, 100% of their campus with a pro-life message. So we want them to be on campus as much as possible. However, maybe you have a really strong ASP chapter in that community or in that town, and that student will actually be better utilized in that chapter, whether it be petitioning or door knocking. So you might have different goals for what you're doing. In our case, we're still encouraging students to be involved on campus. For instance, at Saginaw Valley State University right now, we have one girl who is really on fire for defending the unborn, and she has struggled to get other students involved. They just don't feel the same conviction. And so she is still out there. She'll do outreach typically about once a week, even by herself, and try to change hearts and minds on her campus, which she does. She's really good at apologetics. And we'd like to see her energy invested in that way. And we're going to be going with her to her fall recruitment fair to hopefully find some people to join her, because that's very hard to sustain. And she's doing a beautiful job of it. But still, we all know that that would be hard to do something by ourselves. So we want her to be involved, but we're also trying to help her expand the group and reach out to different groups. So I have a lot to say on that one. Hopefully that answered your question. All right, other questions? Yes.
Yeah, so one of the things that we've struggled with, I think, is maintaining some of the relationships with the college chapters. We've got a lot started, and then either there's a break in connection between the national organization and the college chapter, or the main student graduates and then it kind of fizzles out, or, there's a bunch of different things like that. In the resources on the tips and tricks, you mentioned putting things on the website like meeting content and constitution and those kind of things. I'm curious to hear, in your experience with Protect Life Michigan, how involved the organization is with those college chapters, and like, would you recommend that connection be incredibly strong to the point that like the chapter presidents have a national representative that they're in communication with, or do you think it's better to do it more organically and put those resources out and let the students kind of create those autonomously, almost without necessarily us being involved in that? So can you talk about that a little bit?
For sure, yeah, there's a lot in there, so hopefully I can cover all of that. First of all, it's very natural for clubs to fizzle out. Unfortunately, you have that one student who's super passionate for their 4 years, but then they can't quite find someone to hand it off to, and then the club kind of becomes dead at that point. So we do see like ebbs and flows with our group too, as much as I wish it was really consistent. We had people on fire all the time at specific schools, but that's very natural. That I want to touch on. So we do have meeting resources. I think the more personal contact you can have, the better. Like I know that some schools use our meeting content, but mostly if they don't have a personal connection, they're not very likely to use our meeting content. It's normally because they've known us first and then they use our meeting content and then they're able to be more autonomous. So the ideal would be to have personal connection with each of your groups. Something to help with that could be trying to prioritize based on your goals. So like at Protect Life Michigan, we want to reach as many people with the pro-life message as possible, specifically in our target audience of young people from high school to young professional. So we're trying to be on campuses of like the top 10 universities. So there are a lot of schools that we could be at and we could pour a lot of energy into, but we're kind of starting there. And then if other schools show interest, then we're helping them start up groups, because an interested student goes a long way, but we're not going to spend as much time trying to get that going, at least at first. In the end, hopefully we have lots of college campuses that are covered as well. There was something else I was going to answer with that question. Is there
Sorry.
anything else that I?
So, like, I guess, one of the things is, say somebody doesn't know how to get in touch with us, but they have those resources. Like, do you ever have that where you find out some student created a chapter or something like that, or is it always very, like, you guys are very involved in creation?
I can give specifically for pro-life stuff. So like you have a lot like students that do come in that really care about the pro-life issue. So even if they know nothing about Protect Life Michigan, they're still going to do something. And they likely have a group on their campus. It might be kind of dead, but they can like still join it even if there's only a couple of them. So it's a little different in that way. Like I'm guessing you still have people that are on fire for like the platforms that you have. Like I know the pro-life issue is part of that. But we'll find that students have their own clubs, and then we're hoping to connect with them so we can help them use their time better, be more efficient. Like, hey, you don't need to make meeting content on My Body, My Choice. Like, you can take ours, and if you even want to tweak it, that's fine. But like, don't waste your time doing all of that prep if you don't have to. So that's a little different. So I know it's not super helpful from the ASP perspective, but that's what I would say to that.
One more follow-up.
Yes, go for it.
So you mentioned was going up to like the top 10.
Yes.
So when you go to create a chapter at one of those colleges, do you walk in not knowing anyone and you identify those people through like-minded organizations, or is it usually that you have a connection on the campus and you go through that first? Like, how does that kind of going in blind or cold calling in a sense, how does that work? And have you found that to be productive?
That's a good question. So oftentimes we know at least one student on that campus and we can connect with them and try to like get in with that. But there are campuses where we don't know people. And sometimes with recruitment fairs, like at Central Michigan University where I went to, you can, to my knowledge, you can reserve a table as like a business or an outside organization at the recruitment fair. So maybe it's a Mount Pleasant business that just wants to like showcase what they have to offer. So I think there are some fairs where we can actually get into without knowing anyone, and then we use that recruitment fair to actually identify people that could be really good presidents or secretaries for our chapter. So we've done it that way too. I know we haven't done this in recent years. We prioritize recruitment fairs in a big way still, but we used to do like recruitment tours almost, where we'd go and like just hit a bunch of recruitment fairs and you just show up. If you have a college t-shirt that matches that college, you like throw that one on for that fair, and then you try to recruit there, and then you go to the next college and maybe buy one from the bookstore, throw on that t-shirt. And we would start chapters that way because in the beginning there weren't very many pro-life clubs. We were still trying to figure out how to get like really effective strategic pro-life college organizations going. So you can do a little bit of hustling maybe, or trying to like really work up that recruitment, really get people involved. So those are some more thoughts for you. All right, any other questions? Yes.
So it seems like your group would be a good place for the diversity within the pro-life movement, particularly the religious and partisan and other types of diversity. Is it how does that dynamic work within the clubs, do you find? And is that something that they try to showcase or not? How does that work?
Okay, good question. I will say that many of the students that we have in our organizations are Christian and would lean conservative politically, but that's not true of everyone. We've had people from different political parties. We have people that have no faith background that join our clubs, so we're trying to continue to diversify. I would say as I look at the situation, I want everyone to be involved. They typically, who you have in your club, normally kind of looks like the board of your club. So what groups your president kind of hangs out in, because they're doing a lot of your recruiting, they're inviting a lot of their friends. So it normally looks a lot like that person. So if they're really involved, say, in college Republicans, your group is probably consisting of a lot of college Republicans. It can be hard to diversify, but I think by being at the recruitment fair, you're talking to lots of different kinds of people, and you're really focusing on the pro-life issue, which is the core of the group, and then you can try to reel people in that way. So I don't know if that answers the question. ASP definitely aligns with their pro-life values. So in Michigan, at least, you might be able to find students that would be interested in ASP potentially through our Protect Life clubs, although that may not be true of all of our students. So anything else I can answer with that? Okay, perfect.
You haven't had luck with college publications, like college newspapers. If you're kind of going into a place where you don't have the contact, but then you could put that out there and then let us have contact information. Is that a thing, or do you think that would be like not possible?
It's not a bad idea. I don't know a whole lot about it. I would say we end up in college media, like in their newspapers, maybe after an outreach, or if a specific student wants to do interviewing, like say after Roe v. Wade fell, they wanted to reach out to both the pro-choice group on campus and the pro-life group on campus. So we'll find media attention on campus through interviews like that, or through if we have outreach on that campus, and students find that to be like very surprising when they didn't know there was a pro-life club and then they saw our table outside. So that's more typically later in the semester, but it's worth a shot, it's worth considering. I don't know exactly what that process looks like, that's, I
Well,
can't
like
speak too
newspaper,
much to
college
that.
newspapers, I mean, it also, and sometimes they'll put something in for free, even if
Mm,
you're
and
not
sometimes,
associated with the university. And then other times, obviously, a lot of times they'll charge you whatever.
So maybe that's a little bit
It's
more
worth a
campus
shot,
specific, but it's worth considering. I don't have a whole lot of knowledge in that area though, I will say.
All right, well, thank you very much.